He didn't go looking for trouble. He just wanted a quiet drink after a long day, the kind of peace he'd fought for overseas but rarely found back home. The diner was loud with laughter that night, until it wasn't. A white man, drunk on arrogance and attention, spotted him sitting alone. One look at his skin, one smirk from across the counter, and the air shifted. Then came the milkshake, cold, sticky, humiliating. The crowd froze, some laughing, others pretending not to see. But what no one knew was that the man sitting there, wiping the shake from his face, wasn't just anyone. He was a decorated Navy SEAL. A man who'd faced enemies far more dangerous than the one standing before him. What happened next would turn that small-town diner into a battlefield of its own, and force everyone to see who the real hero was. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching this from? Marcus Reed had always believed discipline could fix almost anything. It's what kept him alive through years of Navy SEAL missions, through nights when silence was more dangerous than bullets. Back home, that same discipline helped him rebuild a simple, peaceful life in a small southern town, a town that said it respected service but didn't always respect the man wearing the uniform. Most mornings, Marcus ran before sunrise. By the time the town woke, he'd already finished his workout, made breakfast, and checked in on his mother down the street. He liked routines. They made him feel grounded, especially after years of chaos overseas. Lately, he'd been working part-time at a security firm, staying out of trouble, and blending in. But some people never let him forget what he looked like. The stares in grocery lines. The quiet shift in tone when someone realized he wasn't just another local. Marcus brushed it off. He'd learnt to. That Friday evening, after a long week, he stopped by a small roadside diner he'd passed a dozen times but never entered. The sign above the door flickered weakly, Eddie's Grill. He just wanted a meal, a quiet seat, and maybe a slice of pie. But inside that diner, someone else noticed him too. Someone who didn't see a veteran or a man, just a target. And before the night was over, Marcus would be forced to remember everything the Navy had taught him about staying calm when the world turns cruel. The diner smelt of coffee, grease, and something faintly bitter, an old kind of tension that never quite left. Marcus took a booth near the corner, back to the wall, out of habit. He ordered a burger and coffee, nodding politely to the waitress. She smiled, polite but nervous, like she already knew what might happen. A few stools down sat a group of young white men. Loud and restless, the kind that laughed too hard at nothing. One of them, tall, sunburnt, with a backwards cap sitting too tight on his head, noticed Marcus. His grin turned into a smirk, and the whispers started. Marcus heard the word hero tossed around, but not the way he used to. It dripped with mockery. He tried to ignore it. He'd learnt long ago that silence can diffuse what pride can ignite. But as the laughter got louder and the taunts sharper, the room grew smaller. The man in the cap stood up, holding a milkshake, pretending to stumble as he walked toward Marcus's table. "Oops," he said, too loud for it to be an accident. The shake splattered across Marcus's chest and face, cold, sticky, deliberate. The diner went quiet. Someone chuckled. Someone else muttered, "Serves him right." Marcus didn't move at first. His instincts told him to breathe. He wiped the shake from his uniform jacket slowly, placed the napkin on the table, and looked up. His eyes locked with the bully's, a stare so steady it silenced even the laughter. But behind that calm, years of restraint pressed hard against the surface. The waitress stammered an apology, but the man waved her off. "Relax, it's just a joke," he said, turning back to his friends. But Marcus stood. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't angry. Just done. The same discipline that saved his life countless times was now the only thing holding him back. He took a step toward the counter, planning to pay his bill and leave. But as he reached for his wallet, the bully shoved him, hard. The cup clattered, coffee spilled, and gasps filled the room. That was the moment the line snapped. Marcus didn't hit him. He didn't shout. He simply caught the man's wrist mid-shove, twisting it just enough for control. The bully's knees buckled from the sudden pressure. The silence was total, except for the sharp intake of breath from every witness. Marcus released him instantly, his voice steady, "Don't touch me again." Then, flashing lights. Someone had called the police. The same crowd that laughed a minute ago were now whispering, "He's dangerous." When the officers entered, they didn't ask questions. They saw a black man standing and a white man on the floor and made their judgment. Hands reached for guns. Orders were shouted. And just like that, Marcus was back in combat, only this time, the enemy wore badges, and the battlefield was home. The diner lights flashed red and blue through the windows, painting everything in a harsh, dizzying glow. Marcus stood still, his hands raised slightly, his voice calm as he tried to speak, but no one wanted to hear him. The officers' hands hovered over their holsters, eyes locked on him like he was a threat waiting to explode. The bully on the floor clutched his wrist, pointing toward Marcus. "He attacked me," he shouted, his voice breaking into fake panic. Marcus's heart thudded, not from fear, but disbelief. He'd faced ambushes, gunfire, and the chaos of war. But nothing felt as cold as being treated like the enemy on his own soil. "Sir," Marcus started, steady but firm, "I didn't touch him." "You can ask." "Hands behind your head," one of the officers barked. The room filled with phones, whispers, and judgment. The same people who had watched him get humiliated now stared like spectators at a show. Marcus's fingers clenched. He could have disarmed both officers in seconds, training made that easy. But restraint? That was harder. He turned slowly, doing exactly as told. The metal cuffs snapped shut, biting into his wrists. The officer pushed his head down, forcing him toward the door. His coffee spilt across the counter, still warm, still unfinished. Then, a voice cut through the tension. The waitress, the same young woman who had watched it all, stepped forward, trembling but defiant. "That's not what happened," she said. The officers hesitated. "He didn't start anything. That man threw the milkshake. He shoved him." Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "You're arresting the wrong person." Phones turned toward her now. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably. The bully's friends looked down, silent. The weight of truth hung heavy in the air. Marcus lifted his head, eyes meeting hers. For a second, the noise faded, the shouting, the fear, the flashing lights. There was only her courage and the quiet dignity he'd fought so hard to keep. If you're still here watching this moment, make sure to subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be heard. The officer holding him loosened his grip, glancing between the witnesses. "We'll sort this out at the station," he muttered, but the tone had changed. Marcus wasn't invisible anymore. Still, as they led him out into the night, cameras followed. Every step was recorded, every glance captured. In that moment, Marcus realized this wasn't just his fight, it was proof. Proof of how quickly respect could turn into suspicion and how easily a hero could be turned into a headline. And as the car door slammed shut, his reflection stared back in the window, calm, unbroken, but burning inside with one question: how many times does a man have to prove he's human before someone finally believes him? Marcus was released later that night. No charges, no apology, just silence and paperwork. The officer who had cuffed him wouldn't meet his eyes. The bully had vanished before they even finished questioning witnesses. Typical, Marcus thought. The mess was cleaned up, the truth was left behind. He walked home in the dark, his uniform stained and stiff with dried milkshake. The same jacket that once earned him salutes now carried a reminder of what it really meant to wear black skin in America. Each step echoed with the weight of what had happened, how quickly respect turned to suspicion, how fragile dignity became when power shifted hands. The next morning, the story spread online. Someone had recorded everything: the shove, the spill, the arrest. Millions watched. Outrage followed. For once, the world saw what Marcus had lived with for years. But viral sympathy wasn't justice. It was a mirror, one that showed the same reflection over and over again, just with different faces. Reporters reached out. Activists called him a hero. But Marcus didn't want attention. He wanted change. He wanted a world where his uniform didn't have to prove his worth. Where no man needed a camera to be believed. Weeks later, the diner closed. Eddie's grill became a symbol, a cautionary tale about silence, complicity, and the price of prejudice. The waitress who spoke up started volunteering with a local advocacy group. And Marcus? He went back to running before sunrise, same streets, same sky, but something inside him had shifted. He still believed in discipline and still believed in service. But now, his mission was different. He began mentoring young black veterans, teaching them what the military never could, how to survive not just war but the world waiting after it. Sometimes, late at night, he'd think about that moment in the diner, the sting of the cold milkshake, the laughter, the flashing lights. And he'd remind himself that strength isn't just about what you endure. It's about what you refuse to let break you. Because the truth is, Marcus's story isn't rare. It's repeated in streets, schools, and stores every day, different names, same injustice. So maybe the real question isn't what happened that night. Maybe it's this: how many more good men will have to stand silently in the face of hate before the world finally stands with them? If this story moved you, take a second to like, share, and tell me in the comments, do you believe things are finally changing?